Welcome everybody to Brass Tacks Hard Facts Live. Tonight is a little bit different. This is our pre-recorded episode with Steve Robertson. If you remember, we had some technical difficulties. So we recorded this just last week and we're popping it up tonight. Before we bring Steve on, just want to give you a little peek into our latest project called Rig Recon. If you're not following Rig Recon already, this is coming from all of us at Brass Tacks Hard Facts. Where Brass Tacks Hard Facts was kind of for the nozzle geek, Rig Recon is kind of for the apparatus geek. So we're kind of going to get into speccing, product details, things like that, things to look for and consider when you're speccing equipment out on your rig. We have a handful of episodes out now on seat and lighting. Next, we're getting into monitors. Then we'll hit some flow meters, pressure governors, things like that. So before we bring Steve on, I'm just going to show you the trailer real quick for Rig Recon, show you what it's all about. So stand by. So that is it. That is our latest project called Rig Recon. Give us a follow on Facebook or Instagram at Rig Recon. We're putting out new episodes about every week or so and going deep on the apparatus side of things. Some really cool stuff to come. So anyway, I'm going to throw this off and get Steve and Jerry up here. Stand by. All right, we got everybody. Jerry, you're there.
Yay.
And we got Steve. Can you hear us?
Yes, I got you guys. We didn't
All
break
right.
the internet. We didn't break the internet this time. That's a good start.
No, not yet. Not yet. Let's not yet. So anyway, this is Brass Tacks Hard Facts Live with Steve Robertson. Only the little secret is we're not really live right now. We are amongst each other, but we kind of pre-recorded this thing. And appropriately enough, we felt that it was important to put this out. This is kind of like the 10th and last episode of our Brass Tacks Hard Facts Live season to kind of cap this this training we did over the quarantine. If you go to our Elkhart Brass YouTube channel, they are all listed there. Over 15 hours of content, and that is kind of our promotion today for 7/8 Day. So we are putting this out on July 8th, the day of the nozzles. So happy 7/8 Day, everybody. We know that's Steve's favorite nozzle, so we figured it was only appropriate to put this this great training content out on 7/8 Day. So we know things are a little bit different this year, but we want to remind you to go back and check on our Elkhart Brass YouTube channel. Lots of great content from this series is on there. Also, the last week of August will be the Water on the Fire conference. So we plan on doing some Brass Tacks Hard Facts live there with some of the instructors, recapping their classroom sessions and whatnot and going deep. So that should be a lot of fun. So we'll go a little bit deeper on the 7/8 with Steve, and happy day of the nozzle. So I'm going to throw it over to Jerry real quick. What's up, Jerry?
Welcome, everybody. Sorry for the technical difficulties we had, but through the wonders of electronics, here we are. We're not technically filming on July 8th, but you're going to see this on July 8th. Proud to welcome Lieutenant Steve Robertson, 18 Engine Columbus Division of Fire, a good buddy, a kindred spirit, without a doubt. Steve, this is going to be your one to lead. We've got some questions that we got in advance we'll get to later, but tell us what drove you to get on the circuit and go deep into stretching for success and getting the initial line right.
Jerry, thanks. First and foremost, thanks guys for having me. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be a part of this. What you guys have done has been top notch, between all the Brass Tacks Hard Facts videos, what you're doing with this series, constantly providing training and education. And the support you guys give instructors is second to none. And without you guys, a lot of this education just doesn't happen. So I think I can speak for the guys you support, just with equipment and letting us use equipment, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of equipment. You guys support us, and let me tell you, it's greatly appreciated by us, first and foremost. Excuse me. How we got started. Actually, it was either an H-Rock or Water on the Fire up in the instructor's lounge. And we started talking about, this was years ago, when we started talking about the great things that Aaron Fields has done with moving hose. And everything about that, and how the push was moving hose and weapon selection and this and that. And we started talking, and I said, but who's talking about positioning apparatus and getting from the rig to the door? To me, that's as important as moving line. And it seemed like there was a big gap there. And we started talking about unique things that aren't in the book, like splitting cars. How do we put a working length on the other side of the cars? How do we position the engine? How do you estimate stretch? These things that seem to have gotten lost in pre-connected hand lines, I think is still vitally important to setting up a good push. So between me and Brian Brush and Kurt Isaacson and Shannon Stone, and I could go Ray McCormick, and we just started talking, a bunch of old guys, and next thing you know, we've got this class, Stretching for Success, and it's been fun, a lot of fun, and where I think we're pushing out a pretty good message as far as how to set up for a good push.
It's interesting. I'm glad that you mentioned where the seed from that came.
And you got a pretty cool logo too. I will admit.
Yeah, the logo is the shit, without a doubt.
Yeah.
That old school canopied rear step, having been on one of those, I really like the picture. I love the fact that the seed for this came in Pensacola. When we're down there for H-Rock and Water on the Fire, it's one of the few times, especially with Water on the Fire, that a lot of the deep thinking engine circuit is in one spot, and we end up with these brainstorming sessions and clinics outside. It's one of the few times the overwhelming majority of us are in one spot, and we make time. We arrive early and leave late so that we have the time to do that and work amongst each other. I'm glad that the seed for that came from that event. I really am.
Yeah, and even just to take that a little deeper, how many times have we been able to break off and I go, Jerry, Chris, I really want to try this. I've not tried this. I don't know whether this is going to work or not, but I want to try this.
Yep.
And next thing you know, we're out there for 3 hours. And that leads to this. This leads to this. And we end up teaching each other, like, no, I've already tried that. This is why it doesn't work. Or, hey, that might work. And here you are, last time I think we started looking around between me, you, Andy, and Ray, and the other people, Dennis Laguerre, and the guys that were out there with us. We looked around. We had 300 years experience out there trying new things, right? Yeah. So I think that lesson in itself is you don't know what you don't know. Yep. And we're constantly, continually learning, and that's okay. That's what this is about. You never stop learning. If you stop learning, you probably should retire. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah.
So.
That's great. That's kind of one of the things that drives, our approach to the market with the Brass Tacks Hard Facts and the Facebook Live has been keep these dialogues going. There's epiphanies yet to come, even for people that have been doing this for a long time, and especially when they get their heads together, that's where great things come from. So, our commitment to keeping this type of dialogue going, we'll be filming live when we're at Water on the Fire. There'll be the byproducts of all those minds together. So let's get into some details, Steve. Let's talk about what happens when you're doing this in the field with a group of people.
Yeah, basically the class is designed around unique stretches, difficult stretches, when we go out, it was funny. We were in Burlington, Kentucky last week. Todd Edwards, myself, did a small class in Burlington, and Hebron Fire Department was in conjunction with them, and we had roughly 30 a day, and we did a lot of different things. You know, when we go out, we're not there to change your hose load. We're not there to tell you that you're running the wrong load or you're doing this or you're doing that. All we're doing is take street experience. Nothing we do is in the book. It's been learned through trial and error. It's been learned through making mistakes and going, we continually make the same mistake. How are we going to fix this? We can't keep going down this road. Like an example of that is splitting cars, right? Who has ever been taught how to get 100-foot working length on the other side of parked cars? We have parked cars both on both sides of the street.
Mm-hmm.
And that came from Engine 18 working because that's our district. We have parked cars on both sides of the street. Probably 95% of the time we're stretching, we're splitting cars. So we finally came up as a crew with a method that we can actually teach and not just say, get it on the other side. So there's actually a process to it now. You know, just like vertical stretching, you know, when Ray and those guys teach vertical stretching and standpipe, who does more vertical stretching than the FDNY? Anybody? I don't know of anybody that does. And they're very, very good at it. So let's tap that source and do what we need to do. Let's tap that source and try to get as much information out of there as we can. You know, Brian Brush with his bundle stuff, he brought that in. You know, a lot of people say, well, we can't use a 100-foot bundle. It's too hard to manage. It's too hard to manage. Well, I don't know. Ask Brian Brush, because he put a couple straps on it, and guess what? You can throw the thing in the air when you set that Minuteman down now, and it's not hard to manage at all. We had a group that uses a triple load in Burlington, and that was fine. I believe it was Hebron Fire Department using triple, and they're like, we just triple the top 100. Okay. They didn't really want to go away with that. So what did we do? We strapped it, and it was manageable. I don't think it was quite as efficient as the Minuteman, but it was something they came away with that, look, there's more than one ways to skin a cat. And I think my friend Jimmy McCormick says this all the time, and I took this away from him years ago. Why are we making this so hard? We feel like we have to reinvent the wheel every time we do anything. You know, change is a great thing. I believe in change, but don't change just to change. Change because we found something better. When you don't have, when what you're doing is working, why change it? I'm not saying don't try things. I'm saying don't change for the sake of change. And I get that question a lot. How do we make change? Well, first of all, when you go to a conference, young guys, listen up, please, because this is what I get. Well, I go to these conferences and I take all this back, and nobody wants to listen to me. Well, first of all, you probably came back with 28 things you want to change, and you want them all changed right now. Let me assure you, if you want to make change in the fire service, there's one way to do it. Firemen are very nosy. Us firefighters we're nosy people. So when you get back from these conferences and you're out with somebody else in the bay and you're messing with something, just keep messing with it and keep your mouth shut. What do you think's going to happen? Chris, what happens?
Yeah.
Hey, what are you guys doing out there? What are you doing out there? Where did you see that? Show me that again. Before you know it, interest is going to show. And now there's not 3 guys in the bay. Now there's 4 firefighters in the bay, then 5 firefighters. Next thing you know, the whole shift's out there going, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You can't force change based on going to a conference. You have to slowly introduce that change, number one. And number two is you have to be able to articulate that in a way that's not offensive and not, I'm a young guy that knows more than you know. It's just got to take time. And until they see it and vet it, they're not going to believe it. They're not going to believe it. So don't think you're going to go to a conference, come back and make change overnight. That's just not a realistic expectation.
Mm-hmm. You know, that you just one of the questions we had, and you just nailed it. So we'll give that answer for Brian Weigel. His question was, can you ask Steve if he had any advice on what he thinks would be the best way to bring about change to a department's attitude about their engine culture? And I think you just nailed it there. It is a cultural approach, right?
Yeah, absolutely it is.
it starts with an individual sense of ownership, and it becomes infectious from there. Then all of a sudden you've got a shift that has the program together, or a
Right.
company has and let it grow culturally.
When I want to sell something to my guys has changed. Trust me, just because Steve Robertson says it, my guys don't buy it. I'll guarantee you that. They don't. It's like, what's the nut job going to change this week, right?
Right.
It's not that way. The first thing I do is I grab the senior man and I start picking his brain a little bit. Hey, what do you think of this? Think about this for a couple days. Hey, I want to try this. Let's think about it for a couple days. And then I'm like, hey, let's go try that. You good with that? Yeah, let's go give it a shot. Because if you sell the senior man on it, guess what's going to happen? The crew's going to follow suit. Yeah, we're like cattle, right? If the cattle turns right, everybody's going to turn right, But if you start small, then it's like herding cats because they scatter. Everybody obviously all of a sudden has their own opinion, and now it's everybody wants 65 different things. That's okay. You need to give each person their time, but vet the information. And I'm going to go down a little rabbit hole here that's kind of just drives me nuts. And that's, the younger generation is so fortunate right now because there's so much information out there. I see both you got your banners up there, drowning for information, starving for wisdom. There's so much information out there. I've watched guys in my class sit there and Google me and Google what I said to see if it's legitimate. That's fine. I'm good with that. I don't have an issue with that. Here's my issue. Okay, I'm going to give Kyle Rivalis a shout out. Engine Company Resurrection, awesome site on Facebook. It does a great job. A lot of information on there. But I watched a young man making a push the other day, and he goes, "What am I doing wrong?" There was no less than probably 120 comments, and every one of them was different as to what he should do. So now everybody is automatically an expert on moving hose. The point I'm making is don't take our word for it. I don't care if it's Ray McCormick teaching me, Chief Isaacson, Shannon Stone, Laguerre, Edwards. I don't care who it is, Brush, Justin Mann. Guess what? Vet our information. You've got to vet the information. And if you don't vet the information, it doesn't work. Knowledge without experience is theory. Period. There's no, so, and I'm going to say it, and it might upset some people. This knee walk thing I'm seeing, it's the way some of these guys are doing it, they're going to get a fast ride to the basement without taking the stairs. And it scares the hell out of me. It scares the hell out of me that some of these guys are out there walking, knee walking this hose, trying to flow water, and they're not putting a leg out in front of them to see what's in front of them. It just scares the hell. And I go, every time I see it, I comment, please don't do that. Yep. Until they've encountered that hole or been in a hole, they don't understand. And unfortunately, a lot of times there's no coming back from that. So that scares me to death. It really does.
Yeah, it gets challenging when you get online and you're trying to look for like legitimate feedback, right? Or comments to what you're doing. And like you said, you get all of these comments back and probably none of them are the same. And really what that does is it makes you go back and just keep grinding on your own till you figure it out. Like, a small little like sidebar story to that is like, through the quarantine, as you guys know, everybody kind of got into some new hobbies, everybody, like, so I'll throw Jerry on, Jerry started baking bread, and and my neighbor and I, we actually started home brewing. So we made our own little, we got all the stuff off of Craigslist, and on the weekends, because we're stuck at home anyway, we started brewing our own beer. So, the first couple were kind of like, so what do you do? Like, I don't know, why does my beer taste like bananas? If anybody knows, by the way, direct message me after this. But, it's like, all right, well, is it fermentation or yeast? Well, then you get online and you just Google it. And what do you think is out there for home brewers? There's like a million message boards, and they're all from like 2012, and none of the answers are the same, and like somebody said, it's like I'm not a golfer. I might golf once every 3 years or something, in some charity thing. It's like trying to tell somebody what's wrong with our golf swing. Like it's your golf swing. Well, no, you need to tweak it here, do it here. But at the end of the day, it's still your personal style. And through like the home brewing experience, now it's kind of like, all right, well, you know what? I don't know how to decipher any of this stuff. So we're just going to dig a little bit deeper on our process and try to tweak it ourselves, right? Because it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. But don't expect to get online and find, the Willy Wonka golden ticket answer, because it's probably not out there, because the way we communicate now, everybody, is giving their opinions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and when Jerry, I think back to when like me, I got 31 years in the fire service, and I think back when I started. My dad was on the job in Southern Ohio, where Athens, retired from the city of Athens, where Ohio University is, and I was a young volunteer, 15 years old, 16 years old, messing around with the fire service, and hey, we got a new American Heat tape in. Come on up. That was a big deal, right? You had American Heat. It was like that was the coup de grace of training, because we lived on Firehouse magazine, we lived on Fire Engineering magazine, and we lived on Fire Rescue magazine.
Yep.
But I will say the material we got out of those magazines as young firefighters back in the day was absolutely legitimate, because it was so vetted. Right. That information, that the guys that were writing for that back then was such a narrow group that the information was so vetted. It was the most current, experience-based information out there. And now we've kind of, I think as a society, we relying on electronics and all of this so much, we've forgotten that people write articles, and you need to read those articles. It's not just videos anymore. There are some very good articles out there that you need to take the time and read.
It's when you put pen to paper, it's like, it's Andy Fredericks, the book of Andy that Aaron put together, right? And the book of Shoop. Those articles that was our social media of the day. But
Gary Lane actually put the Andy Fredericks.
I carry that. I carry that in my briefcase. That's my reading material. I read 2 to 3 articles on every flight. It's in my briefcase at all times.
Yeah, and I thank you for correcting me. Gary Lane on the Andy Fredericks and Fields on the Shoop. But this is so prevalent in our world. I refer to it as the cut and paste mentality, the solution. For example, if we're in the field doing an engine test, or we're doing an evaluation of a hose and nozzle package, it only works for that rig with those people that day. And it's horrible at the manufacturing level when someone orders a ton of product and they receive it and it doesn't perform well with the other part of their system, maybe their hose, because they used somebody else's solution, and it creates a nightmare. It comes down to it's gonna take some effort, right? It's like the whole tip size thing. We had some fun with that last year on July 8th on the day of the nozzle. I did my 15/16 on the 7/8 day, but it's not the solution for everyone. It just happens to be the solution for us, right? And you make it work. But copying someone else's cut and paste solution is not necessarily the best way to go. I like to use the analogy: it'll get you to the neighborhood, but it's not going to get you to the address. The address you got home, it has to work for you.
And elaborate just a second. I'm not going to go deep on it, but both of you, and between you and Andy Plofkin and Jerry and Chris, how many weapon selection classes have you guys done? Ungodly amount. How many times when you open that pump panel and say, "Look in there," do the eyeballs go like this?
Oh yeah.
They never realized that all those 90-degree turns make a big difference in the end result coming out the other end. But I'm just saying, I just use that as one instance of the aha moment, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So, will they ever spec a rig that way again?
Right.
So just that 15-second clip in life could change everything for a lot of years in that department.
Let's take that a step further. We're talking about different tip sizes, different flows. Let's get you a little bit deeper on line selection. All right. You've got Pete, there's God forbid, there's still red lines working in the firehouses, right? There's 1.5 inches, there's 1.75 inches, 2 1/4, blah, blah, blah. Go deep for us on line selection and what drives it.
For me, okay, so to me, when I look at line selection, the first thing I look at is what's on fire. That's number one, and the amount of involvement. Generally, my rule of thumb is up to 3 rooms of fire. I'm going to use 1 3/4 inches and back it up. If I have more than 3 rooms, so I have a whole top floor off, a whole second floor off, I'm probably going to grab a 2-inch line, or 2 3/4 inches, depending on my staffing. To me, not only what's on fire, but it's staff driven. And what I mean, let me elaborate on that a minute. We can pull all the 2.5 you want in the world. That's great. 2.5-inch hose works. Brush wherever you're at. You're about ready to roll over here and start messaging me any moment. But I believe the 2.5 has its place. But I also think the 2-inch has a very, very, very big place in the fire service. In my engine daylight hours, I run with 3 people. I got 3 firefighters. It's me and somebody else. So I can deliver 240 gallons a minute with 2-inch line. 2.5-inch couplings, inch and 16th tip. And I'm going to win a lot there. Okay. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper on that. And the big thing is you're looking at about 16 gallons per 100 feet on your 2-inch line. You're looking at 26 gallons per 100 foot on your 2.5. So let's take that a step further again. 133 pounds per 100 for 2-inch, 217 pounds per 100 for 2.5. Now you're looking at 265 with 1 1/8 inch, 98, 99 pounds reaction force versus 240 with 2-inch, right? You're down to what, 88, 89 in reaction force there. So my opinion, and through my experience, I've learned if you're not going to put it out with 240 gallons a minute, you're not going to put it out with 265. And with reduced weight and reduced reaction force, when I have that limited staffing, guess what I'm going to be able to do? I'm going to be able to move that line. Everybody goes, well, I can move 2.5 wherever you want me to move 2.5. That's great. Again, it looks great in the parking lot. Start adding the kitchen table, start adding the coffee table, the clothes on the floor, carpet, all these things. Start making turns and bends, right? Start adding those things and move it as efficiently. I'm dropping almost 85 pounds in water weight.
That's
per
huge.
100 feet, per 100 foot. So to me, I'm not saying that 2.5 is a bad thing. If you want to pull a 2.5 and knock it in the mouth, do it. That's great. You're not going to hear me say that's wrong. But if you think you can move 2.5 as efficiently as you can 2-inch, I would probably disagree with you. And you're looking at, I think it's like 4.3, 4.4 gallons per second versus 4.1. That 2-inch line is a very versatile line. And when you put the 1 1/16 inch on it, I think it's a wheelhouse. I mean, for me, it is. That's my go-to big line. It really is. Yep. Especially with staffing. If you're staffing limited, you really, really need to take a look at a 2-inch line for maneuverability. And you're not giving up that much water, I don't think. And you're going to leave the line open longer. You're going to leave the line open longer with that 2-inch in the R2.5.
It was. I'm glad you went there. One of the things I have a picture a lot of times when I'm doing instruction in the field that I put up, and it's a marginal fire. What would you pull type scenario, and it inevitably leads to questions about staffing. And you mentioned staff driven, staff limited, but you're speccing a solution that still gives you the ability to pull the correct flow for the fire. Right. It's not an excuse, when the limitations of your staff dictate, or even the performance level of your staff dictate the line pull as opposed to the fire load. And there, that's a significant mistake to make. And it goes right back to how the rig is spec. Do you have an intermediate line solution like a 2-inch, or do you have a ram or that type of a thing? Because you can be riding 2.0, 3.0, whatever, as long as you spec that rig, the GPM per working firefighter, you can move big water.
Absolutely.
It's mobility, right?
And here's the thing is that, we having a ramp pre-connected at 100 feet, and then backing that up with 1.75 inches. Is that a viable option? Absolutely it is. And I think it's a much better option than a deck gun. A, maneuverability, and B, positioning of the first engine. I think those things, you know, everybody's like, well, we only carry 750 gallons of water. Well, use your tank water.
Absolutely.
Everybody says you can't pull this big line. We'll run out of water. What the hell are you going to do? Take it home with you?
Yeah.
Put it where it needs to go, and we don't have these issues.
Yep.
You buy yourself time when you put it where it needs to go. The big disadvantage to me of deck guns is angles. Most of the time on a first floor fire, your angle is here. That's not where we want to be. And your positioning is terrible. Your positioning is terrible. What happens, Chris or Jerry, jump in here. A lot of these guys say, we're going to deck gun it. As soon as you put that big water on big fire, all visibility, what happens to it? It's gone. Now you're relying on sound or spotter left, right, up, down. I think that's another thing that isn't taught anymore. You need to use your other senses than sight. When I'm hitting that wall, the outside wall with a ram or whatever it is, that's a very loud sound. As soon as I move that over and I hit that sweet spot of that window, what happens? It sounds more distant. So then you keep going to the left a little more. Boom, it's loud again. Now you know where your sweet spot is. You've got to use more than vision. You got to think deeper than that. And a lot of times that becomes experience-based. You don't realize you lose all your visibility until it's gone. And then you're trying to figure out, what the hell do I do? Am I wasting this water? Am I putting it where it needs to be?
It's the same thing you have to think when you're in the inside, right? Because you have to rely much more on what you're hearing. You know, and there's a question. It's a good time for this. Reese Eastman had talked about engine placement. How much room do you leave for the truck? So, you know, if you're doing the standard approach where the engine does a drive-by, that deck gun is rarely going to be the resource it needs to be unless the fire's on that side.
Yeah. So,
you know,
I think. Go ahead, Chair. I'm sorry.
No, I just said, you know, we do it that way too. So how often is you drive by and all of a sudden now you're looking at the D side with an angled hit with a deck gun, you know, as opposed to square front. You know, you got to leave the front for the truck. The truck needs to scrub as much as they possibly can. So, you know, it's the same mobility you're looking for with a 2-inch with a ram.
Yeah. So I'm going to take that a little sideways, because to me, it starts with positioning of the first apparatus. I truly believe that. You know, Andy Frederick said for years, the fire goes as the first line goes. I've added something to that I believe is true, and that is the first line will go as positioning goes. If we don't position the first apparatus well, that first stretch is not going to go well. It's just not. When we set ourselves up for the first line stretch, the first line push is going to go well most of the time. So I got to go sideways a little bit and talk about estimating stretch, because I think it's a lost art.
So Steve,
go ahead.
Before we go, remember we have slides. So I got your positioning slide, your estimate.
You want to go there?
You tell me what.
Let's start with positioning first. Yeah, let's go to positioning, and then we'll slide into estimating stretch. I'm sorry,
so
Chris. I forgot I even.
That's fine. That's my job here. I'm the DJ. Stand by. Let me take this down and put this up. And so I got two on positioning. Got this one.
Yeah. So
this
perfect. This leads right into it. So there's a couple things here. If you stretch off the rear, and I'm a huge proponent of hand lines coming off the rear of the rig. It does a lot of things. A, it makes us pull past the fire to leave room for the truck. B, it helps us with it makes it a cleaner stretch toward the fire. And 3, it takes the stretch out of the street. So if you're stretching off the rear, if you simply turn your rig, the nose of the rig, away from the fire, turn your tailboard toward the fire 2 to 3 feet. Just a couple feet makes a huge difference, because in my job, almost everything comes off the rear. So when we do that and we turn that tailboard 2 to 3 feet, that stretch is going to come out of the street and end up in the yard. Guys do a great job pulling past. They set themselves up great. And next thing you know, they stretch right down the middle of the street, and the truck still has to get out and move hose to make the first stretch. So we kind of defeated part of the purpose of what we're doing. Stretching off the rear allows me to see 3 sides of the structure. Then I just simply have to go take a quick peek at the Charlie side. If you're not driving in Mach 2, you can get 3 good sides of the structure. When we see 3 sides, we're looking at construction type. We're looking at occupancy type. All those things. Is there a side door? If you have a side door, there's your basement stairs. Most of the time, your basement stairs are right off the side door, which means your interior stairs are going to be right above that. So it gives us a really good look at what we're getting into. And that's going to help us choose our entry point by doing that. So pulling past the fire, if you're off the rear, tailboard toward the fire. Chris, you got the next one there about cross? Is the next one there about off the side? Did I send you that one or no?
Yep. Let me get that up. Hold on. This one here.
So yeah. So a lot of the fire service is in Crosslays, Matty Dales, whatever. I'm not a fan of this because for years, 80s, 90s, and I still ask this question. Some people admit to it, some people don't. That they've been taught to line up the crosslay with the front door. That's what's been taught for years. My thing with that is twofold. Let's say you only have a 20-foot setback. You have a 200-foot crosslay. What's that first line going to look like? It looks a lot like the picture. It's not going to be good because you have no room for the hose. But if you simply pull past the fire, you eat some of that excess hose up, and we'll talk about estimating stretch in a minute. If you pull past the fire and nose the truck 2 to 3 feet to the fire side, you're going to make that more of a 45-degree pull instead of a 90-degree pull coming off that crosslay. It's going to help your angles getting off the rig. It's going to make the stretch go a little smoother, and your stretch is going to be going toward the fire if you do that. It's not going to be going straight into the front yard where we have no options as far as line placement and entry points. You're not going to be able to manage that cross lane nearly as well if you stop and line up with the front door. Now, if you have a 60 or 80 or 100-foot setback, yeah, you got all the room in the world. But most of the time, people have that area where they are short setbacks, and it's really, really difficult to manage when you have that. So pull past the fire. Yes, you can do it even with crosslays. Nose the rig on crosslays toward the fire, tailboard toward the fire on stretching off the rear.
Okay. Pop that back down there. All right. So
let's head into stretch estimation because that's going to dictate positioning.
Okay, so pop this down, and I have. Where are you? Here it is. This one?
Yeah, that's it. So for years and years, I think we've got away from teaching stretch estimation, and I'm not really sure why. I think for me, it was more about pre-connected hand lines where people had pre-connects and they didn't feel the need for stretch estimation. When I asked that question, a lot of people have the same answer, and that is they were never taught, right? If it was a big building, they took the 250-foot line. If it was a small building, they took the small line. That was their stretch estimation. They really didn't have a rhyme or reason to why they pulled the long line or the short line other than it's the long line or it's the short line. So what I like to do is I estimate the stretch. Now, just follow with me. This might be a little hard to do this way, but I'm going to try to explain it. There's a basic rule of thumb to stretch estimation, and it's length plus width plus setback from the street. So if we have a 30 by 40 building, you add those two numbers together, that's 70 feet. You have a 15-foot setback, okay? That's 85 feet. It's a one-story building. Guess what? You only need 85 feet of hose to cover that entire structure. Let's take a two-story, for example, now. Let's say you have a 20 by 40, that's 60. We have a 20-foot setback, that's 80. And then we have a 2-story. So we need to add a length of hose to get to the second floor. So 80 and 50, 130 feet. So you need 130 feet for that entire structure. And everybody now is going to say, you expect me to do math right now. Pull it into this fire. You want me to see 3 sides of the building. You want me to pull past the fire. You want me to pick a line to choose. And now I gotta do math pulling in. That's not the case. You don't have to do math pulling in. What you have to do is do this math beforehand. And when you figure estimating stretch, you start estimating stretch. I start on every stinking EMS run I got to take, and God knows I take enough of them. Every EMS run, I look at the neighborhood. I can tell you right now, our neighborhood between 11th Avenue and Hudson, between Jefferson Avenue and Cleveland, my tailboard needs to be 2 houses past. The reason I know that, I've estimated the stretch. Let's look at a subdivision as a good example. In a subdivision, you may have 3 or 4 styles of homes, but all those homes are within 1 to 200 square feet of each other. And with that being said, the setbacks are all the same. If you look in an urban environment, look straight down these neighborhood streets. All the setbacks are the same. All the houses are usually within 1 to 200 feet of each other. So if I figure out the stretch for that neighborhood, I've got it. I know I need to be 2 houses. So maybe I pull up and all of a sudden somebody's remodeled this home and it's now a 2-story, was a 1-story. Well, you know what? That's where you call the audible, come off the fly a little bit and shorten it up. Let's say it's somebody put a 1-story in the middle of all of my 2.5-story dwellings. Guess what? I'm gonna pull a little bit longer. Everybody goes, well, what happens if you're short? Too much hose can be as big of a hindrance, if not a bigger hindrance, than not enough hose. So when I go down that rabbit hole, I think of it this way. We build a lot of fluff into the formula to start with. It does not take 50 feet of hose to go from the first floor to second floor. It's usually 20 feet, 25 at the most. Not always, but that's a pretty good rule of thumb. So we've already got 25 feet of fluff in there. One thing I never even talked about is reach of the stream. How far does your stream reach go? Right? That stream, when's the last house, unless you're in one of these McMansions, that you weren't at the front of the building and couldn't hit the back of the building or the dwelling with a stream?
Yep.
So if you estimate the stretch, now I'm going to burn some of that excess hose doing what? Pulling past the fire. That way I'm not dealing with it in the front yard. I'm not dealing with excess hose. I get rid of it before I even get there. And I think if guys try it, learn it, practice it, they're going to see if they figure out the neighborhood, it's going to get you close. And then what do? You call the audible on the fly based on the dwelling that's on fire.
Yep. That's great advice, especially a subdivision thing. I mean, if it's a 3-stick neighborhood or a 4-stick neighborhood, whatever it may be, you can't, you're right. You can't dumb it up enough where you can't call the audible. And there's always going to be the weird one, but it's inevitable. You see the picture, of an engine, square in front of the address with a 25 or 30 foot setback and 200 feet of hose in the front of the house. It's
almost impossible to manage.
Yeah, no, you can't. You're fighting yourself.
Mm-hmm. Steve, do you want me to put the splitting the door video up?
Sure, yeah, and that kind of leads to that. I mean, to me, this all sets everything up. So this animation shows what I call splitting the door. So splitting the door basically is this: you read the entry point, swing of the door in relationship to the fire. You set up either on the inside or outside of the door. The inside being the door being the side closest to the rig. In this case, it would be to the right. So 50% of the door to 45 degrees is the inside, 50% of the door to 45 degrees is the outside. With the swing of the door to the right, the line would come in and we're going to set up on the inside of the door. Now look where the fire is. If we set up on the outside of the door, we're creating a 90-degree turn before we even make an entry point. So when we set up on the inside there, that leaves the backup line the whole outside of the door. I mean, you have the entire outside of the door to set up, and now we're not burying our attack line with the backup line. How many? I guarantee you, everybody out there is nodding their head yes that's happened. We do a great job stretching in line with the door. We're good to go. We're moving forward. Next thing you know, what happens? We're slowing down. Why is this so hard now? Right? So in that animation, a couple things. One, get your coupling up on the stoop. Get it up on the porch, because that first coupling is going to get caught on the stairs of the porch every time. The whole concept of this is, if you're especially short staffed running with 3, I can go all the way into the first corner and pull hose and never have to leave the building. We can continually make that push. Now, in this case, if I was going to go to the second floor, I would want to set up on the outside, because now I can continue to pull hose without losing the first person at the door, simply by reading your entry point, swing of the door in relationship to the fire. And I'm going to throw one other caveat on that. And there's 100 videos on YouTube about this. How many times have you seen the storm door absolutely kick the crap out of somebody for an entire fire?
Yeah.
I mean, you see it messing with the little slide thing. Stop. Take the adze in, drop it below the hinge, pop it. Those screws they're tiny. Drop it down to the middle hinge, pop it, and it's done. You're done. You can take it all the way off if you want, but it's not going to go anywhere after you take the first 2 inches. Get rid of it before it beats you up the entire fire. It will embarrass you, I promise you.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's just one of those things. If you take 15 seconds, that's going to save you minutes, right? Yep. It's going to save you minutes. So those little caveat things to me are sometimes what makes the difference between a simple push and a smooth push, or it could be a little more taxing, let's say.
Well, there's the value of the street experience, right? Because, that's not something you're going to get in the academy. It's going to be something that kicks your butt at a fire, and you're going to find a way around it. Your whole approach in the subject matter is driven by that. It's driven by mistakes that have been made, and you've just engineered solutions that make sense based on your world. So if you're running 3 and there's only 2 people working, you need to be a little creative.
I've never been on a fire where I didn't make a mistake or we didn't make mistakes. We're human beings.
Absolutely.
It's not that we make mistakes on fires. It's how we recover.
Yep.
I can't tell you how many bad tactical decisions I've made over the years.
Oh,
but you realize you made a bad tactical decision, then what do?
Yeah.
You say, stop. We're not going to do this now. We're going this direction. And then we talk about it. We learn from it. Mistakes are going to happen. It's not that we make mistakes. It's we don't make the same mistakes twice.
Well, yeah, you grow.
Yeah, either I'm not teaching or you're not learning at that point, right? And we got to figure that out.
The post-fire discussion, and this is one of the things I encourage with the Brass Tacks Hard Facts. There's a lot of good discussion starters in that footage, but it comes from, you go to a call. Let's say you have a simple room and content fire that doesn't go well. When you get back, I always like to ask 3 questions. Did the fire ruin our day? Was it an equipment problem that ruined our day, or was it a people problem? Right. Yep. And let's just get down to the root cause and start a discussion about it. Maybe it was somebody who was having an off day. They didn't take the swing, the storm door, and it screwed us. That type of a thing. But that's how you come up, when you want a procedure on something, you're looking for repeatable behavior. Repeatable behavior comes from success, and that comes from dialogue. So it's really just that simple, but that's not something you're going to read in a book.
No. Off of that, some of the biggest ass rippings I've ever had in my career weren't in the office. They were on the tailboard after a job. My old boss, Bob Cloud, God love him, he was brutal, but he took me places and pushed me on the nozzle to places I didn't think I was going to come out of alive. And you made mistakes. You learned from those mistakes. You trained on them the next day, and then guess what? You moved on. You didn't dwell on the mistake. It's your day in the barrel until somebody else makes a mistake. But I think a lot of guys, and I'm going to go down here again, I'm going to probably upset people, but leave your feelings at the door, right? I don't know. Your mistake just cost them their house, everything they own. And in my neighborhood where I work, I'll guarantee you most people don't have insurance. So everything they've owned is in that house. Your mistake matters. It matters. And if
Yep.
somebody gets on you for it, guess what? That's what this job, unfortunately, you've been tasked with, is that responsibility. You know, and as an engine company, if you can't stretch hand lines, guess what? Go be a banker. If you don't want to go out and work, go be a banker. You're not going to hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
That's what you're getting paid to do, is to be better than good. Good is not, is good enough if it's your house or your family? No. So why is it okay for the citizens? We have to be better than good. And that better than good came straight from another mentor of mine, Mike Pulaski, God love him. Engine 16 forever, lieutenant for 20 some years, almost 30 years. Unbelievable guy, unbelievable mentor. He goes, good is not good enough for us. We have to be better than good. And I've taken that wholeheartedly, and I believe in it. We have to be better than good.
Yeah, that whole company concept, it doesn't matter if an individual makes a mistake, the company owns it as a group. And you know that whole the culture of the company is what that's all about, right? You know, especially if you're on like 2 + 2 needs to equal 5. Everybody has to have mastery of every function on that engine, because you don't have the extra body to do it. Simple thing like you said, you know, get the coupling to the threshold. It's a single stick welding
It's a
fire.
big deal.
Yeah, it is. It's a person. It's a person, or it's your 2-man having to go all the way back to the door, which what takes away your time from the push.
Yeah.
And you learn that the hard way, and then you modify.
You know, and when my company makes a mistake, I take the hit. And most of the time in the critique, first thing I say is it's on me. I'll take that hit. That's on me. Because why? It's my responsibility to train those guys. It's
Yep.
my responsibility as a company officer. When they make a mistake, it's my mistake. Now, I need to take my beating, and then what do? We're going to go train on it.
Yep.
That's okay. That's part of being a boss. And I think for guys forgot, it's okay to take a hit for your guys. It really is.
Right.
That's kind of your job. Your job is that buffer between that battalion chief and them. You know, it's your job when they start down that path, those chiefs start down that path. Whoa, that's on me, chief. I'll address it. I'll take care of it.
Yep.
It's mine. I'll take the hit. It's my fault. I'll take care of it. I'll address it. I see you brought it up. I run a tight shipwreck. I saw that on the internet about a month ago, and I'm like, that's my company.
It's gold.
It's true, because expectations, and I guess we'll go down that rabbit hole now of expectations. And I wrote a few things down here because it really it bothers me. Everybody in the administrative world wants to throw out the word expectations. Here are my expectations. Well, what are they? Are your expectations there to cover your ass? Or are your expectations there for performance? Because I think too many times expectations there to cover your ass. Look, I've handed them a sheet of expectations. They should have known this. Really? Really? So, you know, that little sheet of paper does nothing for me. I don't believe in it. I think that's ridiculous. The second thing I want to talk about is, do you take the time when you hand them a sheet of expectations to do every one of those things as a company officer with them? What have you taken the time to say, I expect you to be able to stretch an 1 3/4 hand line proficiently? Well, I don't know. Did you go out and do it with them? I expect you to do this. Did you go out and do it with them? Because to me, if you don't, as a company officer, go out and do every one of those things with your people, you're failing them. You're setting them up for failure before you even start. Because when I go out and I stretch, my new guy, Kevin, God love him, we call him Mayhem for a reason, right? Literally, that's his nickname is Mayhem. You know, like the commercial, everything he touches turns to shit. Well, that's Kevin. God love him. And I love having him in the firehouse because he works hard. He wants to learn, but he makes a lot of mistakes. Am I upset with Kevin for that? No. We just train harder. But when I went out and started stretching with Kevin, do you think we stretched one time and that was it?
Yeah.
Yep, we're good. You can stretch a hand line. No. I threw in side doors at him. We got to stretch the side door and back stretch. We have to split cars. We have to go vertical. We have to be able to run a trunk line. We have to, all these things. It's not just stretch an 1 3/4 pre-cadet. It takes time. But as we do that, and I see him succeeding and getting better, what does that do in my confidence level in Kevin? It goes up. Kevin is getting confidence in me that I'm just not flapping my gums, that it's legitimate, that these things are that important to me, that I'm out there doing them with him.
Right.
And you got to quit that crap of here's your expectations or here's your SOPs, learn them. That's not doing anybody any good. And all that's going to do is make yourself feel good about yourself and check the box. That's all you're doing is checking a box, you know. If you do your job on the training ground, right? I really believe this. If you do your job on the training ground and you train your guys, you don't need to micromanage them. Because your expectations, you know that they can succeed in those expectations. It's pretty simple. So let's say things go sideways and I go to Kev, what happened? What'd you see that I didn't see? Oh, boss, I saw this. That's why I did this. Okay, cool. No worries. Or boss, I saw this. Same thing you did. Well, then why did you do this? Well, I thought, hold on. Have we done the expectations? Right? Yes, we did them together. You know what I expect. Are you able to perform those? How do I know he's able to perform those? We did them together. So obviously you're just going to go sideways and do whatever you want. Well, I can fix that as well. Right? I mean, we make this a lot harder than it is.
Yep.
And guys buy into it. Guys buy into it wholeheartedly. The whole mentoring thing, my senior guys are all over him every day. What do you want to do today? What are we doing today? All the time. And what's that do? Every time I get a new guy, we go through that mentoring process. It's like a 9-week program we have. What does that do every time I get a new guy to the rest of the crew? We hit every one of these things as a crew. We hit every one of these things as a crew. So we've got our whole training plan for the year based on rotation of new guys coming through the house. And guys buy into it.
And it's simple. It's simple.
Steve, I'm gonna take this down. I'm gonna put up, and we got a couple questions. I'll intertwine into this next part here.
Sure.
I'm gonna put up your 5 keys to winning engine companies. Does that sound good?
Perfect.
When we get into the line selection, I got a couple questions here. So anyway,
okay.
Go for it.
So I broke this down into 5 things. And I think especially as a young engine firefighter, if you can master these 5 things or do these 5 things well, guess what? You're going to win a lot of times. 95% of the time, you're going to win if you do these 5 things correctly. I'm not asking you, God love my friend Dennis Laguerre, I'm not going to ask you the coefficient of what True ID hose is or Sniper hose is or Mercedes hose is or what the Freeman ratio is. I'm not going to do that. You need to start with mastering these 5 basic things that lead to all that. Eventually you can get there, but you got to do these things right first to be able to function as part of the company. We must position the apparatus correctly the first time. I think anybody that's been on the job any period of time has had a fire that we positioned the wrong. It went sideways. We're going defensive. Now we got to move or we're going to lose that $1.3 million fire truck. And that's pretty hard to explain. You got 5-inch down. You got multiple lines down. Now everybody's scrambling to move this rig because we placed it incorrectly. We must position the apparatus correctly the first time. We must select the proper size and length of line. Again, we've already talked about that. How big's the fire? GPM versus BTU is all it comes down to. There's no big formula. You can do it, all the Iowa formulas or the National Fire Academy formula, all that. GPMs versus BTUs, that's what puts a fire out. So
before we get to the point of entry one, we've got 2 kind of questions on stretching. A little bit technical, but I think we didn't hit them before and probably is now the best time to do it. The first one, which I do have some experience with pony lengths that I'd love to chime in on, but this is from Michael May, and he says, will using a pony length that is not the same brand as the crosslay coming off affect the flow at all? And would it be affected much going from 175 to 188? And would you ever recommend a rig using crosslays only be able to pull each crosslay off of one side? So that would be meaning the second or third line come around the rig. You know, that's kind of a divisive thing online is when you talk about cross lays. Well, the first, you know, particularly if you're going to like a Minuteman or something like that, you're not going to be able to. You can do it, but ideally, you know, one's going to come off one way, then the second line's going to have to come all the way around the rig. So I'd like to hear your opinion on that, and then I've got some experience with pony lengths too.
So I'm going to go to the part about bidirectional poles. One thing that we kind of came up with, and it's something I've done on my rig on my Minuteman bundle for a long time. There is a way to do that where you can pull both sides. If you leave your loops on one side, you know, I think it's 2 and 4, whatever it is on that side for 100-foot length. And then on the other side, just take the nozzle length 18 inches or so past and wrap it back on top and then strap it right there. You've created a handle on that side. You've created a handle on that side so you can pull it that way. Your loops on the other side can pull it the other direction. So your nozzle's not getting caught on the bottom. Just loop the nozzle back up on top, and that makes that a bidirectional pull with your shoulder length. I'm a huge. Go ahead.
We just recently put that on my department where we did the modified Minuteman and we loop it around.
Yep.
And it's nice because you do have a visual to know, you know, which one you're going to pull. And they are still set up. We have 3 crosslays, so they are still set up. Kind of 2 of them would go one way and 1 would go the other way, but you can pull them through. I would say the only thing that I recently found on a fire was when I pulled it was kind of the one that was supposed to go off, say the officer side, and I pulled it through on the driver's side. Is when you take it off, if you're going to shoulder it and put it on the front, or I'm going to turn around and pull it onto my back, right? Now, I put it on my shoulder the wrong way, but then when I got to the front door, I just cleaned it up there. So just kind of one of those little nuanced things that, you know, you learn when you pull them is we're able to get them bidirectional, but then it just kind of comes down to how you're going to put it on your shoulder.
So that's the other advantage of having them strapped. So if you have it strapped, I can actually throw the thing in the air and it's not going to move if it's strapped correctly. 2 straps is all I use. And I like Brian's straps. Brushed Fire by Trade straps are, to me, the best. They're simple Velcro. I have no loops to go through. I have no buckles. I have nothing. They're just Velcro. My tabs are up. Boom, I pull my tabs. I go to work. The other caveat that, though, is I'm a huge proponent of a 100-foot line. If you don't have a 100-foot working length on the opposite side of the vehicles or in the yard in line with the door, you're setting yourself up for failure. 50 is just not enough for most fires, unless it's right inside the door. 100 gives you that opportunity most of the time, at least to make the second floor hallway. And if I take good angles in the second floor hallway and use the reach of my stream, I'm probably going to be putting water on the fire pretty easily.
Yeah.
And that 100-foot gives you that option. Now, as far as the bidirectional, also remember another reason I don't care for crosslays, your hose beds on your crosslays are going to dictate what you can and can't do based on size. And there's nothing you can do with that except start changing specifications to make those changes.
I will also endorse those straps, and I also learned from you is you know, sorry, left-handed firefighters, but you know, you've been dealing with it your whole life.
Inside,
you know, most guys are going to be right-handed.
Yeah.
So we started doing that where when you shoulder it and you drop it, basically we use the yellow straps. All 3 are right on top, so it's boom, boom, boom. The pull-through straps that are really common for like standpipe packs, I'll be the first to admit, I really wanted to like those because it gets it real tight, which is nice for a standpipe bundle. But what I found is when we dropped it in the yard and we used 3 straps, so when I go boom, 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 then I had to pull each strap. So in addition to popping it, then I had to pull it, pull it, versus just popping all 3.
You know, Ben Schultz teaches that class seconds, right? It's seconds. Having to reach underneath to grab that strap is seconds.
Yeah.
You know, and I found on those, if you put the straps to the inside, most people are right-handed, if they're the inside, boom, you're going to drop it. They're going to be there for you. You know, Chris, you said one thing that I'm going to just quick sidebar. You said when I take that bundle to the door, Now, there's basically three options, and then that's a forward stretch, a back stretch, and a side stretch, right, with that bundle.
Yep.
I am a huge proponent of a forward stretch, because if I take that bundle all the way to the door, I now have to back stretch it before, only to do what? Walks forward again. And we naturally want to take that bundle all the way to the door. I am a huge proponent of dropping it on the sidewalk. When you drop it on the sidewalk and you get a good 20 feet out, you charge that line, it's going to take care of itself. You don't have to go back and touch it. So to me, I'm a big proponent of that when you have to. Now, that side entrance door where you have 5-10 feet between houses, really short. You know, we got the roofs that do this, like this roof's over top of this roof. You get a second floor going off, you've got two houses burning pretty good.
Yep.
You got to backstretch. You got to backstretch between the houses.
And I mean, honestly, I think that's the nice versatility with it.
Absolutely.
We do get a lot of those, like that picture showed, where it's 30, 40 foot setback. If I drop it at the door and I pull it back, the nice thing I like about it is being able to flip it to do the attack over supply.
Yep.
Okay. So I might drop it up front, pull my loops back, attack over supply it, and then as I'm walking back up to the door, I can start getting my mask on while I'm walking.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It comes down to, again, you're talking 30, 40 foot setbacks.
Yeah.
My word in the world in the urban environment is 15 to 20 at the most.
Right.
So there's two different worlds there. And that's what I say. This is not to change what you do.
Exactly.
Just open your eyes to options until you try to figure out what works for you.
That versatility behind it. And I'll say another thing is, you know, if we've been like third due maybe, right, or fourth due, and you get assigned, you know, the forward stage in the front yard, and you're on deck, it's what we use, and you're next to go to work. That's a great time when you're just standing in the front yard waiting to do something, and you see, you know, like two lines going to the front door. Stage those lines, attack over supply if nobody's done it yet. Yeah. And more or less you can just line them up right there in the front yard. It's great.
It's huge. You know, the other thing, as you mentioned, that you're standing there, you're waiting to go to work. Those are the little things that are going to help. You know, when I'm second due and we're walking up, I look at two things. Everybody remember, your primary job second due engine is support the first line. If the first line's not moving forward, that backup line doesn't mean a damn thing. And I look at a couple things. A, is the smoke changing color? Are we putting water where it needs to be put right now? And B, is that line moving? Because if we're not changing color and that line's not moving, my first firefighter, get your stuff on, get to the door, start moving hose. Because until that line's moving forward, that backup line is important, but it's not as important as that first line moving forward. So you've got to support the first line second due. That is a huge, huge, huge thing.
Yep. Do you guys run we call them pigtails or a pony length?
Yeah.
Okay.
We do.
So, and then do you guys buy brand new ones or do you use old hose or whatever comes up?
We usually make them out of condemned hose.
Right.
Our hose section makes them out of condemned hose. If you burn a hole in a piece and there's 30 foot left, they'll make our pigtails for that. Do I think it's a big deal running a smaller size than the other size? Yeah, probably. I'd probably go the other way with that if I had to. Is it gonna split hairs at the end of the day? No, because to me, it goes down to a couple things. When you're figuring out your rig, you hook the flow meter up and you take it up to what your desired flow is, and that's your pump pressure. Yeah. So let's stop overthinking it.
I think it's again, it all comes back, as Jerry's already said it, to testing, right? Now, when you rig your equipment, I will say for a long time we did the same thing. Maybe a section that didn't burn through, but maybe a piece that failed hose testing, right? And we would cut it, recouple it, and then it wasn't until we started building some pump charts that we're going kind of off the number the hose guys gave us and the nozzle guys, and it just not adding up. So all of a sudden we laid out 4 or 5, in-service pigtails, and come to find out, this one's 8 foot, this one's 12 foot. They're all different vintages of hose, so basically, we buy all new hose, but then we are still reusing old hose for these pigtails. So then we started flow testing them, and we were finding anywhere from 20 psi loss in an 8-foot piece of hose, because it's a 30-year-old piece of hose that keeps passing hose test every year because it'll pressure test, but it won't flow test, right? So I've always been a big proponent since then is that if you're buying new hose, you can get those pigtails. I'll sell them to any size you want and have them.
Yeah, and that's something, maybe I think that's a good message, Chris, because I didn't realize it was that much.
Yeah, I mean, again, until we tested it, we would have never thought. And it was anywhere from 15 to 20 psi, because again, there were really old pieces of hose that just got by every year on a hydrostatic pressure test, which is what most of us think of when we hose test, not flow testing. The other thing to consider is, where are you putting that piece of hose, right? It's right against your pump, so it's probably going to get the most pressure on it. So now we took this piece of hose that failed hose test. We're going to shorten it, put it there, and we're going to put it on that piece that's right by the pump where it's going to get the most pressure on it. We just did, Jerry and I just taught last week at FDTN, Jim McCormick at the Fire Department Training Network for one of his classes, and we did a Know Your Flow class. And the rig that we were using there had a pony section. So we had combat ready on the attack line, 200 foot of combat ready, but then we had you know how this goes, like an off-brand pony section. We couldn't find any markings on it. It was just,
how do we know what it was
or where it was. It was just fire hose, right? And it was about a 10-foot section of hose. So from the discharge gauge on the pump panel to the inline gauge between the pigtail and the cross lay, flowing like 150 gallons a minute, we were getting 30 psi loss in our plumbing and our pigtail.
Wow.
So again, this goes back to testing your equipment. If you're running these pigtails, it's really important that you test them and to know that friction loss in your pump. And, Jerry might want to speak to this. We fielded a really good question before it, and somebody's going, listen, I don't have a flow meter for example, Key has their calculator online that kind of shows you their hose, and it's going to get you in the neighborhood. And we can tell you what our nozzles flow at different pressures, which will also get you in the neighborhood. But you're not going to get into the address until you can actually go flow test it and see what that friction loss is in your plumbing, because it could be 5 psi and not be anything, or in this case, plumbing in a pigtail, we're 30 psi. So if your nozzle pressure needed is 50 psi, is 30 going to be a big deal? Yeah, it definitely is.
Yep. And again, I think, just to reinforce, the biggest nugget there is, unless you're testing for flow, you're not going to find those problems, because a pressure test is static pressure over a duration of time. I mean, you could have a liner that's completely migrated down to a pinhole and not realize it was a static pressure test. You have to know what it's like. You said, Steve, the toughest math of the day: GPM versus BTU. What's it costing me for flow?
Yeah.
And I guess that's where, at least we're using the same hose.
Yeah, right. The same.
So for me, like I said, when I flow it and I say, here's my number, it's not nearly, I'm not catching that drastic.
Yeah. But, we're like, hey, we bought all new hose, but
I didn't realize, I never thought of it that way. I really didn't think of it that way, that would be that big of a deal, but it makes sense when you truly break it down.
Yeah.
We always flow test on the intake side for that reason. Yep. And the other thing, here's the reality you have to overcome. Let's say you have a bumper line and a couple cross lays. Preset PD is using the same preset for all of them and expecting the same flow, and they're going to be radically different. You could have side-by-side cross lays over the pump casing and have 2-3 different numbers of 90 just getting into the chick sand swivel, let alone the crap that goes to the bumper.
Right. It's
going to be different.
One other question while we're still kind of on stretching. Christopher Vasto, we're going to talk about long lines for a second here, Steve. He said, a question for Steve: what's his thoughts on running the new popular, I don't know, maybe in his region, 400 foot 1 3/4 versus a typical 3 to 400 of a 2.5 to a gated Y, reduced to 100 of 1 3/4, or gated Y to a reducer with a 2.5 setup? I guess, Chris, without having you on here, my decipher of your question is, what's your preferred way of going long?
Right. So I know the 400 foot line, I've seen that Nicky Martin, those guys running with 400 feet of hose, and that's great if that works for them. To me, that's a pretty hard thing, unless you've estimated that stretch for their area. That's a pretty hard stretch estimation to make. If you're that far away, and unless you know what it is, that's a pretty hard estimation to make, in my opinion. But I personally am a fan of a trunk line. I just think I just have a little more control over it, I think. Reducer versus gated Y. Well, I'm going to tell you, I put a water thief on the end of mine where I got a 2.5 in the middle and 2 3/4. Dennis, don't start having a seizure. It's okay. I'm still only going to run one line off of that. Okay. And I think that's the advantage is I have a shut off there. I'm still only running one line off of it. I think, when we get into gated Ys, and Dennis and Daryl, I know covered this. I'm not going to go deep on this at all, but common sense, if I have 2 different lengths of lines, two different nozzles off the same trunk line, that pressure governor is going to be working overtime, and somebody's going to get either not what they need or going to get way too much. That's just the reality of it. So I prefer a trunk line of 2.5, and then when I get up there, I usually 100 inch and 3/4 bundles what I usually take. My thing is with appliances, if you're going to do that, usually 5 to 10 feet from the door, from your entry point, I like that. But get it as close to the building as possible, because inevitably, one of these truck guys that don't pick up their feet, they're just going to be shuffling like they shuffle from the recliner to the rig. They're going to shuffle and kick close that appliance. So get it close, get it by the bushes, wherever that's out of the common pathway of people walking. As soon as I drop that trunk line, I can say charge a line. We can still be stretching the 1 3/4. It's shut off. It just gives me a little bit. But your second line, remember this: if this is an apartment building or something like that, multi-unit, 2-story apartment, whatever it is, your second line needs to match the structure. To me, your initial attack line, you should take the fire apartment and the one adjacent. That it should be able to cover the fire apartment and one on each side of it. Your second line should be off a second trunk line and should match the structure more radically than your first line. The whole goal with that first line, if we can get water on the fire quickly, good things are going to happen, and we're hopefully going to prevent that extension. If we get beyond that, that second line needs to be able to get some reach there to get in the attic and get to those places that initial line probably isn't. And again, it goes back to another caveat. Okay, I put the first floor, we got fire on 1 and 2. I put the first floor out. Where am I going to go next? I go up to 2 and put that fire out. No, that first line should stay on 1. That's why you have a backup line. That second line should go to 2. It's a simple transmission of 18 to battalion 3. Go. Yeah, Chief, I got the first floor knocked down. I need a second line to go to 2. We're going to stay on 1. And how do you learn that lesson? You have a line burned through, and you and your crew are sitting on a porch roof. Does that sound like experience?
Right.
Yes, because it happened. We thought we had the first floor completely out, and guess what? It came back, and next thing you know, it's right up our butts. Our line burnt through, and we ended up on the porch roof. If I'd have simply sat on the first floor, made sure that was out, send the second line to 2, good things happen. Your RIT line becomes your backup line. Everybody's still winning. And we're not taking those chances. We don't need to. Nobody wants to go to the second floor, put that fire out too, as much as I do. But it's not the right thing to do. And as a boss, you've got to just it's the hardest thing with an aggressive crew is holding them back. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing, but that's still your job to do.
Well, that brings us right now to our next key, is we must select the best point of entry, right? You want to go deep on it, and then we'll take it the next.
So point of entry can go a lot of ways. I teach quite a bit in Florida, no basements. Texas, a lot of no basements, some basements. If you have basements, this is where reading the fire and seeing 3 sides of the building is key. And you can't come in Mach 2. I think we've all had that driver that's had their foot all the way to the floor when they hear working fire, and next thing you know, their knees shaking because the damn thing won't go any faster. Their foot's to the floor and the knees shaking. Well, slow down. You got to bring it down a little bit. you can't come in at Mach 3. Let that officer see 3 good sides of the structure. When he sees 3 good sides of the structure, that entry point most of the time is the front door. What if the best entry point's a side door to get to the basement? It's a straight shot. I no longer have to go through the whole house to do it. Maybe there's a rear door and it's a kitchen fire in the rear. Maybe stretching to the rear is the best point. The best point of entry is the shortest, most direct route to the fire. That's it. Don't read more into it. What is the shortest, most direct route to putting water on the fire? That's the best point of entry, Chris.
Okay, I'm going to throw up the other 2 points.
Okay.
All right.
Stretch better than good. Again, this goes back to Lieutenant Pulaski. You know, when he talks about stretching better than good, good is not good enough. You know, we are professional firefighters. Your job as an engine company, as being part of an engine company, is to get the first line in place, in the proper place correctly, and be able to put the fire out. Good is not good enough. We have to be better than good. That is our job as an engine company. That's like somebody saying one of these truck guys can't throw a 24-foot ladder by themselves. That's a ridiculous statement, right? We have to be better than good. That's what we get paid to do. So stretch better than good. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the last one real quick. We must be able to move and flow the line effectively. You know, that goes back to everything Aaron teaches and all the guys out there teaching movement. Man, that's so important. And you look at the stuff Ray talked about and his stuff with the coordinated attack study and the UL and coordinating ventilation with flowing water and moving and flowing through the last 2 studies has been the most effective by far in reducing temperatures and all those things. I just think it all adds up. Everything we've talked about to this point adds up to the last thing, which is being able to move and flow effectively. And it's just, if we set ourselves up for it, it makes that last part a lot easier.
What's your, and we'd be remiss if we didn't use your tagline of the bulldozer.
Yeah. You know, I've always used the concept of we're 160 gallon a minute bulldozer, right? Bulldozers aren't fast, but what stops them from going forward? You know, you got to set a pace. And Aaron has done such good things with nozzle forward. I mean, unbelievable the amount of people he's trained. But I think some people have taken what he's done and added their own caveat to it. And all I see is how fast these people can push across the parking lot. That basically tells me 2 things. Again, this might offend people, but it is what it is. It's A, you've never done that in a fire because you crawled right past the fire. You've got to give time for the water to work. I don't know what fire you're in that you can move that fast in a fire and expect it to go out. It just doesn't work that way. You know, Kurt, my buddy Kurt Eisen said, what's he say? Move hose like gentlemen, right? We got to move hose like gentlemen. Set a pace. Very seldom do you hear Engine 18 holler for hose for one reason. We set a pace that allows the control person to do what? Control, right? And if we use the reach of our stream and we take good angles to the fire, we can still get water in that compartment very, very quickly without running. You know, I see guys say don't run. What about this? What about this? When I'm coming up to the door, I don't run. I move with a purpose. I move with a good purpose. How many people have you ever seen running with their head up? Looking up here. What does human nature tell you to do? Where's your head? How can we select the best entry point, inside, outside, split the door, set the line up for a good position with my head down? I don't think you can do it. Now, I can move with a purpose and have my head up and start making those decisions. And a lot of times I've seen guys run, they end up making mistakes and having to go back and fix them. So whatever they gain from running, they lose in having to go back and fix mistakes. If you want to run away. You know, go run the Boston Marathon. God love you. It's not going to happen on my crew. You know, it's just not. And I say, guys want to get off the rig all masked up. You don't see everything you need to see. I'm a firm believer in that. My guys get off the rig one time, masked up, ready to go. And that's if an auto fire, because their first job getting off the rig is to clear the car. Unfortunately, I've had a couple of those fires where people have been trapped inside cars burning. When you get out, that's not the time to put your mask on when you hear somebody dying. So that's the one time I allow my guys, I want them masked up, on air, ready to go. When they get off there, they're going to clear that car. We're stretching the line for them. So I don't know if that.
As we're winding down here, the 5 keys are really a culmination of everything we've talked about, right? It's I see it as a bunch of small victories, small disciplines that need to line up if it's going to work at the end. It's just like anything else, you know. Rig placement is key. We've addressed just about, you know, every one of these questions that came up, but you know, the danger of a pre-connect or 2 pre-connects that are the same length that come off opposite sides could mean a stick. And if it's a stick of hose and you're the second line, there's a good probability you need to go further than the first. And now you're starting out one stick short. So those little things you need to pay attention to. A great nugget with the simple twist of a steering wheel after arrival, lining up the rig with the approach to the structure. You know, the simplest thing that people just don't do. Angle it. You know, truck guys are better at that because they're thinking about pedestal placement, right? You know, there's a valuableness in there for the engine as well. But Steve, the feedback, it's funny. You've built a foundation in this approach that's street smart. You know, to utilize that term, so many other people use it, but it's based on, you know, it's based on corrected mistakes that you've made and everyone else has made, that, you know, get it down to a street handbook that you're not going to get out of you know, an IFSTA type book.
Right.
And you know, I think, you know, we teach together so frequently in the field, when we mirror that kind of approach with the narrowing down of the weapon, you know, it's you've heard me say it in the field, right? You got Aaron's nozzle forward, right? We're nozzle back to the rig, you know, that package, and you got Dennis who's hydrant to nozzles and everything in between. But each piece of that has to be at efficiency, and the time to do that is not at a fire.
No, and that's what I say. It's like estimating the stretch.
Yeah.
You should be thinking, given a rundown in your head, and second thing you should say is, where am I putting this rig if this is on fire, on every EMS run? Every EMS run you go on, estimate the stretch, where would I park this rig? Because until you get that mindset, until it's in your hard drive, it's not going to be there when you need it.
Right.
And I think those reps, it's just reps of working your mind in that process. So then you go, if this is on fire, am I taking inside, outside, split the door, right? Paint those lines on your entry doors at the firehouse. Every time your guys walk over those, guess what? What are they thinking? Inside, outside, right? Once they get the concept, it works unbelievably well. And they're not going to get it overnight. Let me assure you, it takes time. It takes time.
Let me toss out. I closed a couple of these past sessions with this type of question. You're an extremely experienced boss. You got a lot of years on the job. Give me a nugget for the 0 to 5 year firefighter.
You know, I think the first one is don't let your crew dictate your learning. You know, we are so now computer based. If a crew sees you wanting to learn and you're out in the bay and you're doing things, self-motivated doing things, they're going to come join you. If they're worth their weight in salt, they're going to come out and they're going to help you and they're going to teach you. I don't look at Kevin and say, Kevin, this is what we're doing today. I say, Kevin, what do you want to do today? Or Kevin, what are you doing today? Right? I think be coachable. You know, be coachable. Just because you saw it on the internet doesn't mean it's legit, right? And take that approach of, look, I saw this. Can we try it? Not we need to change this because this guy said so. It may not work for your job. It may not work. Maybe they've already done that. Have that open mind, and nobody owes you a damn thing. You owe the citizens when you took the oath. They're going to provide a nice salary for you and a nice career to provide for your family for the next 30 years. You owe them. We don't owe you a damn thing. It's what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it tenfold. And we're blessed. Oh my gosh, how blessed are we, guys, that we get to travel the country and learn from all these guys that are just so stinking smart and into the job, right? I mean, Chris, how many times you put up your yellow piece of paper to where some pretty damn cool ideas have come out of that room, you know, as far as true change in the fire service has come out of that room.
Yeah. When you're in an environment, when you have guys like, Captain Morris asking as many questions as he's answering, you're in the right spot.
Yeah, exactly. and you know, that guy, you know, I every year I try to sneak up there. It's usually Jimmy McCormick and Cap Morse up there. And I just sit there and listen. It's okay to listen.
Oh yeah.
That's the other thing guys forget is but it's okay to listen. That if you're in the room, regardless of what room it is, and you see guys that have invited you into that room, meaning I don't care whether it's at the bar having a cocktail or wherever you're at, and you see those people that you look up to, mentor, know have more knowledge than you, you don't have to tell them how smart you are.
Exactly.
They're allowing, no, but I'm serious. It's a mistake. It's a mistake that a lot of guys make. You're in the room for a reason. You're around that group for a reason. It's okay to ask questions, but just listen a little bit. Just listen a little bit. You're in that place for a reason. Act like you've been there. That's all. Act like you've been there before. That's all.
So Steve, you know, we know a lot of this stuff's been postponed this year, but a lot of it's kind of opening back up. Where can we find you online? Where are you going to be teaching next? I put your email up here and your Twitter and your Instagram and all that.
Yep. So Stretching for Success on Facebook will have my bookings. I know I got Water on the Fire coming up in August. I'll be Richmond at a conference in Richmond in August. Doing Muddy River Fools in November. I just booked that. Things are starting to come back online. So Fort Lauderdale Fire Conference. Teaching with Timmy Collette down there. We're doing live hoarding fires down there again. So got a lot coming up. H-Rock again in December. I got several other in between, but if you have questions or looking to book or seeing where I'm at, the Stretching for Success Facebook site's probably the best place to look to see where I'm going to be and what I'm going to be lecturing and such.
Awesome. I just want to throw this up here real quick. So remind everybody, consider this a resource too, as you're always looking for new training opportunities. BrassTacksHardFacts.com has all of our training videos there, as well as our website with some more technical stuff. You can find us on any of the social channels. We're on all of them. Do yourself a favor, check out Rig Recon, some really cool stuff coming out there for, you know, because deep down we're all a little apparatus geek. Let's be honest. We all have a little fire truck nerd in us.
Where's Flofkin at? Where's Andy at, right?
Yeah. Facebook and Instagram, that's where you can find that. And then the last reminder here is Elkhart Brass. We're part of the Safe Fleet group, the Fire, EMS, and Industrial group, made up of FRC, lighting, pressure governors, displays, camera systems, Foam Pro. We all know them as the gold standard for foam controllers. Elkhart Brass and ROM doors. You can check out our latest and greatest stuff at safefleet.net/FEI. So just want to take a final note here and say, you know, Steve, sorry this was kind of a hassle. The internet did not cooperate, but we did. We got this recorded, and I think it's very appropriate that this is our 7/8 day release. So happy Day of the Nozzle to everybody out there. And thanks for hanging with us, sharing some knowledge, and we look forward to seeing you out on the streets.
Yeah, Steve, thank you from me to you and everybody else that's listening to this on 7/8. Thanks for spending some time with us, and Stretch said we'll see you in the street.
Thanks, guys, so much. Stretch, win with water, Stretch for success. Stay safe, and we'll see you in August at Water on the Fire. Looking forward to it.
Awesome, guys. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
Guys. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.